With some color correction effects, Premiere Pro determines what is a shadow, what's a midtone, and what's a highlight. But you can change how Premiere Pro determines that by changing the tonal range definition. And two effects that we work with have tonal range definition properties. I'm going to show you how to work with those properties in this video. To follow along, go to Working Files, go to Premiere Pro Projects, and go on down to Tonal Range. We're going to work with two clips here, and I've already applied the Track Matte key to both of those clips, because sometimes when you work with tonal range definitions, you really can't fix the tonal range for the entire clip, so you need to limit it to a certain area. But it's pretty easy to limit those areas with Track Matte keys because they don't have to be very exact once you've adjusted the tonal ranges. So let's check out the effects that have tonal range definitions in them. Go to Effects, go to Video Effects, go to Color Correction, and there are three effects that have tonal range definition properties: three-way color corrector, RGB color corrector, and luma corrector. Now, we've not worked with the luma corrector in this course because luma corrector is basically a subset of the RGB color corrector. So we've limited ourselves to the RGB color corrector and the three-way color corrector. So we're going to work with these two effects in this lesson. I'm going to apply both of them to these two clips on top. So I'm going to select both of them using a marquee selection like that. I'm going to double-click on RGB color corrector and double-click on the three-way color corrector to apply them. Now let's take a look at these guys. I'll click away to deselect and then select this first one here and go to the Effect Controls panel. And I'm going to turn off the three-way color corrector for now and move it up like that. Notice there's the Track Matte key applied to this, but it's turned off. We're going to get to that later. I'll show you how that works in a bit. But we're going to work with the RGB color corrector here. And we want to adjust its tonal range definition, which is down here. It's inside this little disclosure triangle. To see the tonal range definition, we need to go to the output. So instead of composite, we go down to tonal range. Anything that's white is a highlight, gray is a midtone, black is a shadow. That's the predetermined definition for tonal ranges here using this effect. But we want to change that. So I'm going to open up the tonal range definition here. And we've seen this before in the three-way color corrector, but here it's tucked away, right? And you can see that shadows are considered to be like the first 30% of luminance, and then midtones from about 30 to about 70 or so, and then highlights are about 70 to 100. We can change that. What I want to do is I want to make sure that this building is basically the only thing that's considered a highlight. So I'm going to decrease the things that are allowed to be highlights. I'm going to pull this to the right. That limits things that are considered to be highlights until it starts turning gray, where I'm defining it as a midtone. So I'll get it right to the edge like that. Now I want to further limit that by pulling this one over here to say more things should be considered to be blacks or shadows. Pull it down like that till we finally get basically just that thing in the middle there that's considered to be a highlight. Now notice there's some highlights sticking out over there, and we're going to deal with them using a Track Matte key. But it's fairly easy to get rid of them because we just need a sort of generic Track Matte key just to deal with that. All right, now we've changed the tonality definition. We've not changed at all how this clip looks. We've just changed how the properties here will work with the various tonalities. We want to work with the highlights only, and we've now limited the highlights to just that building for the most part. All right, I'm going to turn off the tonal range view here and go back to composite. Nothing's changed, right? I'm going to expand the view here a bit by closing down this little mini timeline there. I want to work inside the RGB, so I open this up. Now, normally when we work in the RGB, we're working with the master control. We're covering shadows, midtones, and highlights uniformly. But I want to tell it, nope, let's work with just the highlights. So I go to tonal range here, this little drop-down list, and say, we're going to work with highlights only here. So now anything we change here will affect only highlights. I want to change the building's color. I'm going to go down to the blue gamma and the blue gain. Gamma and gain tend to work with the highlight end of tonality. Open up blue gamma. Start adjusting blue gamma, and you can see how that building will start changing. And notice nothing else is changing for the most part. A little bit is changing over here, but for the most part, it's just the building that's changing as we change the blue gamma. So we can limit what we change using the tonality range. Let's go down to blue gain, which will handle the highlights a little bit more dramatically. We'll go like that as we go along. And notice how I move things. Only the highlight area here inside the waveform scope is moving. That's because we're saying just fix the highlights here. That's how that works. I'm going to turn on the Track Matte key so you don't see that stuff changing over there. To see the Track Matte, I'm going to just turn things off for a second. Show you the Track Matte. It's this very simple graphic here. That will reveal whatever's on this layer, but I want to do the reverse and actually conceal that on the layer and reveal this part of the layer. So I've got the Track Matte key set up such that I'm reversing it. Turn it on now. We'll turn these guys back on. And then make that Track Matte key active. Notice that color's not gone away. So we focused our work right on that area and that area only. All right, we can do the same thing with a three-way color corrector. It just works a little bit differently. Turn off the RGB color corrector and go to the three-way color corrector and turn that on. there is the tonal range definition that is always visible. To see the tonal range, you need to open up this little disclosure triangle there and click on this checkbox there. Now we want to do the same kind of definition again. Slide this to the right a bit, kind of limit what's going to be a highlight, and bring the blacks way over like this. And there we go. The track matte key lets us see what's below the timeline. We're working only in this area here. Let's turn off the tonal range here. So now we're going to work only with highlights. Now if I change the midtones or the shadows, nothing will happen there inside the building. I'll just show you. I'll pull this over like this, and nothing is happening in the building. That's because the building is pure highlights, which is one advantage to doing a tonal range definition change. I won't do that. We'll work only here in the highlights. I'll pull that down and you'll see how we're affecting the hue here. Let's move it around the wheel like that. Pretty easy to see how that works. All right, let's move on over to this coastal shot. So we'll start off with the highlights. Again, we've got a track matte key here. We'll deal with that later. Click on this top clip here and we'll close down the 3-way color corrector and work only in the RGB color corrector first. Open up the tonal range again, so go Output, Tonal Range. I want to make the entire sky a highlight, so I want to expand the highlights rather than contract the highlights. So I do that by opening up the tonal range here. I'm going to make the highlights more. I'm going to move the highlights into the midtones so that midtones become highlights. Right, and I'm also making some things down here highlights that I don't want to change, but we'll fix that with the track matte key in just a second. So there you go. Now I've made the entire sky a highlight. That's about as far as I need to go there. So I'm going to turn off the view here from tonal range back to composite. And now I'm going to adjust the color of the sky by going down to RGB, scrolling down a bit like this, changing the tonal range from master to highlights again. Now I want to make things a little bit redder. So I'm going to go red gamma. Maybe pull it a little bit to the right like that. Go red gain, which is the highlight end of the red control. Maybe even add a little bit of blue, kind of a purple sky. So go to blue gamma, just that a little bit like so, and maybe a little bit of blue gain. We also have affected the waves there because they were turned into highlights instead of midtones. So I'm going to change that by turning on the track matte key. I'll show you the track matte by turning these guys off and this guy on. So there's the track matte that just basically is going to conceal everything but the sky. I don't have to turn off the track, but it's convenient now when I'm working on it. When you apply a track matte key, it automatically makes the matte invisible here along that track, but I'm turning this off so it's easier to work with this as I explain this to you. Turn on the track matte key, and now that color down there has gone away, and we focused only on the sky. All right, let's do the same thing with the 3-way color corrector, so I'll turn that off. Going down to the 3-way color corrector here, and we'll work with its tonal range definition. I'll expand the view. I'll show the tonal range definition here. We want to make sure that is a highlight, so I need to expand the definition of a highlight, bringing in the midtones to say, no, midtones are now highlights, or at least that part of the midtone range is a highlight. Now we can work on the highlights, so I'll turn off that view. Now if I adjust the midtones here, for example, nothing will happen because we have no midtones there in the sky. So we're going to work only in highlights here. It's pretty convenient that it falls into this one little wheel here. Pull it out there ways, make it kind of extreme so you can see it. We can change the hue of the sky because the entire sky is considered to be a highlight. We haven't actually made the sky brighter by defining it as a highlight. And so when you work with the highlight wheel, you're affecting the highlights like that. All right, let's reverse the process and do things that are considered to be shadows, just so you can see that we can reverse the process. First of all, I'm going to reverse the track matte key. So it won't be perfect because I built the track matte key for the sky as opposed to the ground. But if I reverse it, it'll be pretty close to working for us. Let's change the tonal range for this area. We'll scroll down here. Click on Show Tonal Range. I'm going to reset everything here by going to 3-by color corrector and resetting the entire color corrector. And we'll change the tonal range for the ground by saying we want to work with the shadow end. We want to bring more midtones into the shadows. So I pull this to the right to say these midtones here, let's make them shadows, shall we? We're not actually making them darker. We're defining them as a shadow. Now again, to do this right, we'd want to add the track matte that goes down here so that this area is not included. But just for demonstration purposes, though, we're not going to do that now. All right, let's go on up here, turn off the tonal range view, and we're going to change the shadows. But again, I can show you if I move the highlights, nothing's going to change inside the shadows because now this is all considered to be a shadow. So let's go over here to the shadow wheel and work with that. I'll pull that down. You see how we can change the color, all that stuff at once, uniformly changing it like so. Making it warmer, making it cooler, whatever we want to do. So sometimes it's good to overrule how Premiere Pro defines tonality ranges. So you can take more control over how you apply color to certain areas inside a clip.